Now, France is to have yet another Prime Minister, her fourth in little over a year, before Friday night here. That as France moves away from the likelihood of snap legislative elections after outgoing Prime Minister Sebastien Lecornu carried out intense 48-hour discussions with France's political parties to try to avoid a dissolution of Parliament. Now, Lecornu appeared on national television last night where he said a way forward is possible, potentially pointing then to the French President Emmanuel Macron calling this time on a more left-wing Prime Minister. See if that may provide the stability needed. Well, let's talk about all the latest. And we're joined now on the programme by historian of modern France at Queen Mary University of London, Andrew Smith. Andrew, good to have you with us once again. We were talking on Monday when, of course, we had the news that Sebastien Lecornu announced his resignation. Since then, he's had that 48-hour period. He's come out of the end of it. I'm not quite sure what we've learned. I mean, a lot of the political parties have very, very vaguely perhaps adapted their language, but we still seem to be in a bit of a blockage situation, even if he himself, Lecornu, says there is a way forward.
It was a very busy day. It's been a very busy 48 hours in terms of comings and goings at Matignon, as people have come and consulted Lecornu as the resigning Prime Minister to kind of figure out where their positions are. And it's been really interesting reading, what's come out of all those meetings, seeing the expectations going in, the statements coming out, watching the positioning that's going on in terms of all of this. Now, like you say, there is no immediate resolution. One of the things that I think we can, resolutely say is at the end of that 48-hour period, nothing has been solved per se. But I think one of the things we saw in Lecornu's speech last night is that actually he is really talking about some potential routes forward, some momentary kind of glimpses of a landing strip that this could actually work itself out. And well, immediately what we've seen is another 48 hours is the request. They've hit the snooze button on the appointment of a Prime Minister. And I think really what we're trying to do is find out where there is this possibility for putting together the right kind of Prime Minister. I've said it before, but this is really a hunt for a kind of Cinderella government in a parliament of bears. There is something needed to be just right, a moment of finding something that will work for everyone. And that is the real challenge, I think, at this stage.
Andrew, I'm going to pick up on one of your phrases there, a glimpse of a landing strip. Who's going to land on it? I mean, is it potentially the socialists this time? Is that who he's going to go for?
It's a real challenge. So we've got our kind of common contenders we might look at. The standard options for Emmanuel Macron to name a Prime Minister would be, of course, we've seen him do it before, someone from within the Macronist majority, or perhaps someone kind of technocratic. That would be the kind of the default option, we might say. But I think we can resolutely say he's tried that and it didn't work. Bayrou, Lecornu, this is not going to be something that is easy to kind of land with this. Of course, the other option might be looking at the Republicans, the centre-right, part of that socle commun, as we've seen. But again, that would really harden the idea of the left against the government. It would, make it more difficult to see where that would come from. Of course, Retailleau himself is the Interior Minister. Bruno Retailleau is the president of the Republican Party, but he is someone with presidential ambitions himself. And he said he will not serve in a government led by a Macronist or by a left-wing and like a socialist from the party. So that's a real challenge as well. And then, as you mentioned, there's this option of someone from the left. Now, the Socialist Party has been sort of toying with this idea. We know, of course, the outcome of the legislative elections perhaps said that what was the kind of new Popular Front was the largest grouping in and of itself, not the largest party, but the largest grouping within it. Since then, of course, that grouping has fallen apart. But actually, the fortunes within that grouping have changed. The Socialist Party looks to be much more confident in terms of how it presents itself. And of course, the General Secretary, Olivier Faure, has been someone who is confidently negotiating with Lecornu yesterday, talking about the kind of deals that might be done, talking about what's going on. And I think the Socialists, they would want to see something change. Whether it be the pension deal is back on the table. Of course, that very controversial pension deal forced through. We saw the former Prime Minister, Elisabeth Borne, who forced that through, famously using the Article 49.3 quite a lot, is back to saying, well, maybe it could be negotiated. We saw Lecornu already said, maybe that 49.3 could be ruled out. These are concessions to try and bring the socialists to the table so that even if it is not a socialist Prime Minister is appointed, he might be able to negotiate some type of non-censorship agreement with the Socialist Party and enable to pass that budget by the end of the year. And I think that's something that's really important. But there are discordant voices in the Socialist Party. People like Boris Vallot are very keen that this is going to hurt the Macronists. There needs to be more. They need to try and eke something out. They need to show that Macron was wrong not to appoint someone from the left back after the first dissolution. So there are lots and lots of ambitions, and it's very difficult to find that landing strip because there are so many different people angling still for 2027 and the presidential election on the horizon.
Yeah, Macron is wrong is the phrase as well, which has kind of echoed throughout the whole of his second term. And the crucial point, which you mentioned there, of course, is that pension reform. I mean, Sebastien Lecornu seemed to indicate he said to Emmanuel Macron, perhaps this is the area which could break through here, which could be the way to solve it, is to give some kind of hint, at least, that it will be re-examined or reconsidered by the entire National Assembly, rather than it just being pushed through using that technicality, the 49.3, which Elisabeth Borne did.
Yeah, I think that's really important. There needs to be something to bring to the Assembly. If the Assembly is going to be empowered, if this is going to be about Parliament solving its own problems, then there needs to be something to work with. There needs to be, some discussions to be had. Not everything can be reserved. I think in some ways we can see that since that dissolution, for the president, the National Assembly has really become a machine for passing budgets. It's not doing anything particularly groundbreaking. People said that reality, what was happening is things were sort of jogging along, that Bayrou had survived as long as he did by simply not really doing very much. And at the moment he tried to do the budget, that was where the big problem came in. So this is really, I think, important in terms of giving something back for that negotiation. Now, one of the things that Bayrou tried to do by talking about the budget, by raising the deficit, by making his big speech when he tried to shock everyone, he said that was it. It was an electroshock. You can imagine the defibrillator was intended to be sort of applied to the National Assembly to enliven people and say, this is a pressing danger. Now, that failed, and that didn't awaken the kind of desires of the Assembly. In fact, what this 48-hour period has done is a similar type of electroshock. It has re-energized that debate and said to people, look, focusing minds, what is possible, what can be achieved. And that's one of the things Lecornu said last night. He said, look, we have 210 MPs, he's talking about that socle commun, that common base, who want to avoid dissolution, who want to move towards some sort of parliamentary solution and find something there. Now, he also said, and this is important, that actually the socle commun, this common core, which has been the centrists plus the Republicans, it's been the basis of Macron's governing kind of minority during his second term, might actually be a thing of the past. And that's one of the things we can see with the pension reform, because already there are people, even within Macron's own kind of centrist majority, who are saying, well, we actually don't think this is a great idea. This is, really quite difficult. We've seen the Republicans, of course, say, actually, this is another challenge. We've seen the employers' union, of course, not a political party, but with a lot of weight in those political debates, MEDEF, the employers' union, saying, actually, we don't want to see this pension reform reopened. This is all about growth, deficits, and budgets. So there's a real necessity of sort of, essentially flying this through the kind of the eye of a needle in terms of landing it, negotiating it, finding concessions, perhaps not overturning it completely, but doing some work at the edges that lets the socialists show some image of cohabitation, some image of recognition of their importance in the parliament, whilst not spooking the horses on the centre right and destroying that governing minority in the whole. So that's why I think it might actually look towards a non-censorship. Yeah.
Just going to ask you really, really quick. You've got 30 seconds, okay? No longer. If it goes wrong this time, if he has appointed someone from the left, he will have tried the right, he will have tried the centre, he will have tried the left. If that fails as well, dissolution surely is the only answer.
I think that's the case, yes. Lecornu said it was disappearing into the distance, but it is not over the horizon yet. There is still a need to find something that works, a candidate who doesn't have presidential ambitions, who is willing to talk to the left, but who can actually bring these parties together. But this is not finished. 48 hours is a long time in politics, as we've seen this week, and that dissolution is still on the horizon, but hopefully a bit further in the distance.
Perfectly timed to 30 seconds. Andrew Swift, thank you very much, Andrew Swift, historian of modern France at Queen University in London. Good to have you with us as ever on the programme, of course.